So you mentioned earlier the class distinctions that were drawn in North Korea, and this is a characteristic of other totalitarian states, including
Mhm.
those hypothetically predicated on absolute equality. You saw this happening in the Stalinist era and also in Maoist China, where if your family members were associated with a group that was deemed oppressive, then that still might impede your chances of survival, let alone
Mhm.
progress 3 or 4 generations later. So and I believe your family, if I remember correctly, your grandfather or great grandfather was a landowner.
Mhm.
And so what did that mean?
So exactly that's what North Korea does right now. They still have this thing called the guilt by association. So if one person does wrong in North Korea, it doesn't mean just you are the one get punished. 3 to 8 generations gets punished. So when there was one high-ranking official escaped, they killed more than 30,000 people because of the one person's defection. And that's the cost that I had to bear, me speaking out afterwards of my 3 generation family back in North Korea that punished. So that's like that. My great grandfather, I think, were small landowner before the communism, everything began in the 1900 only that time. Because of that, then my grandmother was her so status was down. And the trickiest thing about North Korea's status is that there's not even something called marrying up. Some other countries, if you marry somebody from higher status, you can go up with them. But in North Korea, there's only going down. If you're high status and marrying to somebody low, you go down with them. That's how they prevent mixing different classes. And
Right. And so
mhm,
that's one of the consequences of this idea of group guilt. And
mhm,
so the system is predicated on the idea, or was predicated originally on the idea, that the landowning class was oppressive, tyrannical, and well, they were thieves. They were immoral thieves, essentially, as an entire class. And then that class guilt became so pervasive that it wasn't escapable across generations. That's where the idea of group guilt takes societies. And how would you contrast that to what you see in the West?
it is so so unbelievable. I mean, I went to school in America to university and or talk about this, I mean, America also had a slavery and like all those oppression, but now they're collectively being guilty for their history and how many generations ago was that even? And then people still trying to punish people who were not doing it at the time. And how do you choose your ancestors? I think that's what was the hardest thing for me to be in North Korea is that I mean, I wish I had that option to choose the things back then, but it's not within your control. And now also in America, I see these trends of people going after people whose ancestors were perhaps the like slave owners. But how is it even relevant to that individual right now who they are? It's not something they contributed back then. So this idea of like, the guilt collectively we associate them and I just never knew that the rest of the world was going to be also like this in a different degree. But this is something that mainly North Korea holds against its people. They literally call you blood tainted because your father, your great great grandfather did something that means you are forever, your blood is tainted. You are not like redeemable. And almost now in America, I see that because some white people, their ancestors owned the slaves, they are like redeemable. They should be forever guilty about their privilege. And like the idea of this word guilt is also very like, it's very hard to even look at this. And it's so heartbreaking. Why would you cause that kind of shame on other human? Why it's not their fault at all?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. But why you would want that to happen? Um,
Mhm.
well, I think it's part of a demand for some hypothetical radical equality. I mean, it is the case that some people are born. We're all born with different advantages and disadvantages, and some of those are linked to our ethnicity and our race from time to time. And there's an attempt to, at least in principle, level the playing field, but it gets very dangerous when you try to equalize the outcomes and when you enter the realm of guilt by group. That's a catastrophe. Everywhere that's ever been instituted, it's just a complete catastrophe, because exactly the same thing happened in the Soviet Union and in Maoist China.